Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly show of Classroom Without Walls, a school for entrepreneurs. My name is AI. I'm the host of this weekly live streaming show. On this show, I interview leading social media, digital marketers, business leaders, entrepreneurs to come here to share with us their best strategies and tips so that we can future-proof our business. You can also listen to the show on the traditional audio-only podcast. Just search Classroom Without Walls and you will find our live show. And today I'm interviewing my friend Nika Kabiri to talk about decision science. It is really interesting. As I was getting ready to getting prepared for this interview, I was doing some research and I discovered, to my great surprise, that human beings on a daily basis, we are making 35,000 decisions. I was like, oh my God, that is a lot. No wonder by the end of the day, we have decision fatigue. I don't want to make any more decisions. So we're really going to learn from an industry expert to learn more about decision science and how we can apply it to make better decisions in our business. We're also going to talk about consumer research and how consumers are making decisions and how we can apply that understanding to help us, entrepreneurs and business owners, to make better decisions, to attract more loyal customers, and so much more. And we are live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Periscope, on Twitch. So if you are live with us right now, let me know in the comment section where you are joining us live from, social media wise and geographically speaking. And our guest of honor, Nika, is a super smart lady. She has a JD and a PhD. Like just one PhD almost killed me. I can't imagine having a JD and a PhD. And she's a decision science expert and consultant and a writer and a teacher. And she and her co-author, they have a book coming up. Super excited. And we're definitely going to learn more about their book and where you can get a copy. And Nika is also the founder of Kabiri Consulting, where she and her team apply decision science to help business owners to make better decisions. So really excited. And as always, the show is sponsored by StreamYard, as you can see on my t-shirt. And over the last 4 years, I have tried so many different platforms to go live on social media. And StreamYard is my all-time favorite. So if you are interested in checking out StreamYard, I have a discount code in the comment section. Check it out and check out StreamYard. So without any further ado, Nika, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I love talking to you. It's like getting an injection of pure energy right into my veins. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Likewise. As I mentioned earlier, you're a super smart woman. So I feel some pressure, I think this is the first time I have a double degree actually on my show. So really honored. And thank you so much everyone for joining us live. Really excited to see you all. So let me know where you are joining us live from. So Nika, we're talking about decision science. And so for people who are not familiar with the term, so explain to us what this actually means.
Yeah, it's just basically the study or the science of human decision making. So it's rather than looking at people or places or things and trying to understand them, it's about understanding that process that goes on in our heads as we make the choices that we make. And there are two ways that people really do it. One is to go about trying to understand how to make the right decision. Mm-hmm. And the way I like to go about it is to try to understand why people make bad decisions, which is a lot more fun to think about.
That's more exciting for us, right? So I can't wait to learn more about the reasons why people make bad decisions. And I can attest to this. I have made lots of bad decisions in my life. So I'm really interested in learning more about the psychology, the science behind it. So what inspired you to pursue a career in this path, from JD to decision science? Like which one comes first and what's the interconnection?
I consider that JD to be kind of a hiccup, like my trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I got off track a little bit. So I mean, everyone's impressed that
That's
I have
a big challenge. That's a big challenge.
It is, but I didn't exactly make good grades in law school, so I'll say that. Yeah, I just kind of digressed a little bit, but from a very young age, I always felt like an outsider. And, I was at a very impressionable age when the hostage crisis happened, and I was born in Iran, and the Iranian hostage crisis happened. And it was pretty immediate that I was kind of on the outside and kids didn't want to play with me. And so I was kind of always on the outside looking in. And throughout my life, I just realized that as an outsider and a non-participant, I noticed things that didn't really add up, like decisions that people made that didn't really quite add up. And fast forward to grad school, I happened to work in my sociology grad program with some really heavy hitters in rational choice theory. Michael Hector, Carl Dieter Opp, Edgar Kaiser. These are just really big names in that area, and just fell in love with it. And it just kind of married my question, like, why are people making such silly decisions with the science? And that's where it all came together.
Well, can I ask you why? Is that like a dissertation question? Like, why do people make silly decisions? Now, like, you really piqued my interest. I'm really curious. Why do people make bad decisions?
Well, there are a couple reasons, and it's funny because the reasons why we make bad decisions are also the reasons why we make a lot of really effective decisions. One is that our brains are wired for efficiency, and that's how we've survived all these years. We want to think fast. We have to drive conclusions really quickly and move really quickly. And if you think about us as a species, if we weren't able to do that, we probably wouldn't have gotten this far. But that's also a flaw, because sometimes we take mental shortcuts. They're called heuristics, and we draw conclusions that really aren't backed by evidence, or we act impulsively. And so that need to be efficient is really kind of a flaw. And so that's one reason why. And the other reason why is we're social creatures. We need other people to survive. And so we make a lot of our decisions based on what others might either think of us or expect of us. And sometimes that's not the greatest thing.
I mean, totally, especially, my background is in education, especially among like teenagers, right? Like that social pressure, like what are they doing? So I feel pressure to make similar decisions, and without really thinking through the entire situation. Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and totally, right? We love things that are convenient, that are just easy. Yeah, like, the shortcut, give me the shortcut. Yeah, exactly. We see that in marketing all the time. So here's a great question for you from Dan. Thank you for joining us live. And he asked you if you have ever heard of Super Forecasters by Philip, and along with the Thinking Fast. Oh,
yeah. This is like my Bible. And also Super Forecasting is sitting right over there on my desk. Yes, absolutely. I highly recommend both of those books. Very, very influential in shaping the way that, this one is shaping the way that decision science is done these days.
Well, that's interesting. So for people who are not familiar with those books, do you mind giving us like a quick kind of abstract summary and of each of the books so we can check it out and learn more?
Oh my gosh.
This is something really new to me. Yeah.
This is a really hard question to answer. This is such a rich book that it's really kind of hard to answer. But to summarize it, it focuses on decision-making under conditions of uncertainty, which is so relevant right now. So, when you don't have enough information, or you don't have enough time to get the information, what happens to your brain? How do you go from where you are to the decision you make? And that's what this book really is about. So it talks about all the different ways that the brain compromises when you're under conditions of uncertainty. And I recommend reading this not from front to back like a regular novel or a book, but just like, I don't know, if just open it up to a section and just learn
like a menu. Yeah,
it is. And I do it over and over again. And Super Forecasting is just, it's all about how we're really bad at making predictions, and we need to make good predictions to make good decisions. But for some of the same reasons that are covered in this book, we don't do that very well. But it's really about being better at predicting the future and knowing what our limitations are as we do it.
Oh, very, very interesting. I definitely look forward to checking out the book. And speaking of uncertainty, right? I love this comment. I don't know who commented on this. And COVID, right? Specifically denying it as a classic case study in terms of, flawed decision making. Very interesting. Definitely. And when you put this in international context, how people in different countries, political leaders, are actually responding, taking action. And I think it's a very interesting case study and how people are dealing with uncertainties. Yeah.
It is very interesting. There was a study done, and it was published in the Harvard Business Review about CEOs in different countries. And it was a really great example of how different cultures sort of influence the way that people make decisions in those cultures. So leaders or business leaders in the United States, for instance, are expected to be very decisive. And the guy on top is expected to make that decision. And he can pivot if he wants. Like, he can make a decision, change his mind the next day, but as long as he is making those choices, he's considered an effective leader. In countries like Japan, for instance, there's more of consensus building. It's okay to take your time. It's okay to drag it out and really get all the information together. But once the decision is made, you don't pivot. You just stick with it. And it's interesting to see different countries react to the COVID crisis and different leaders react based on those cultural constraints. So our decisions are definitely culturally constrained. They're in a cultural bubble, and that's also kind of where it kind of can go wrong sometimes for some cultures.
Definitely. I know that goes back to diversity. That's why I think diversity is so important. I always remember when I interviewed Duncan Wardle on the show. He's the former VP of innovation at Disney, and he said something that I will never ever forget, which is diversity is innovation, right? So when you have a diverse team, you will be exposed to a different way of thinking, and that helps you innovate. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, diversity in people means diversity in ideas, means diversity in the ways that people make decisions. And so you don't get stuck. You don't get stuck in a particular path.
Yeah, totally. So as I mentioned earlier, right, I was so shocked that human beings, we are actually making 35,000. I actually double checked. I was like, did I misread like a zero or something? And so with that many decisions, and I definitely have decision fatigue, especially by the end of the day, I have to make so many decisions. And so share with us, like, what are some strategies, from the decision science perspective that we can apply to make better decisions, right? To overcome that decision fatigue.
So it's interesting that of those 35,000 decisions, most of them are very, very minor. Like, what am I going to wear today? What am I going to have for dinner? Like, even just what earrings I was going to wear. That was a decision I had to sit there and make for a second. And a lot of them are inconsequential, like which hoops I wear. Not really that big of a deal. But those bigger decisions, those are the ones that you really have to be careful about, like decisions that affect your family, your livelihood, your future. And if knowing that decision fatigue is a thing, it's really important to save those decisions for the morning. And that's just a very straightforward bit of advice. Or to sleep on decisions. Don't ever make those big decisions at night. And it kind of really plays out in our personal relationships too. If we're deciding how to handle a conflict with our spouse or partner, and people stay up late at night and they have these fights because they don't want to go to bed angry, it's, that's not really the best advice sometimes, because decision fatigue can get in the way. So save those big, conversations and big decisions in the morning. If you want to talk to your boss about something important, make a meeting in the morning, not in the afternoon. If you really want the best out of your team at a brainstorming session, put it in the morning, not in the afternoon. Save the afternoon for things that don't require a lot of thought. But also just recognize what decisions can be put off. Sometimes we feel very pressured to make decisions right away. And if somebody comes to us at 5 p.m., the end of the workday, and says, we need an answer, you don't react impulsively. You can slow down and ask, is it necessary?
Do we actually have like kind of shortage in our brain? Like, neurons are now connecting. I'm just curious, like, what actually happens inside our brain by the end of the day? So are there actually any physiological changes inside our brain because that is making it harder to make decisions, or just like kind of, no? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, if you think about, the brain is just like any other part of the body. It needs time to recover and restore. And if it's working too much and it doesn't have that break to restore and recover, it can get exhausted. And surely there's some neurological components to it. I mean, there's a lot of research on how hormones and a lot of these other physiological experiences or phenomena impact our decision making, even from hunger, or eating carbs for breakfast is more likely to stimulate kind of a less collaborative work environment among people in your team if they all eat pancakes for breakfast versus if they eat high protein meals, because of the way that protein and carbs impact the physiology of the human body and make them more or less likely to socially punish other people. So yeah, there's all sorts of
that is so interesting.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Yeah. So here's another comment from Dan. He feels like a big part of the problem is people often do not want to think better or question why they are doing what they are doing. I definitely agree with him on that part. And I see this in technology all the time, and people are adhering to an outdated or bad practice. Even scientific professionals are subject to severe bias. Yeah, for sure.
Every day I see this every day. It's and it's frustrating because it's also, that just goes to the efficiency, right? It's really efficient to make decisions, say, the way you've always made them, or it's really safe also socially to make decisions the way that other companies have made them. I've worked with CEOs who have always defaulted to making decisions that they've seen their colleagues at other companies do without, and that's fine if that other decision is also rationally best for you, but it's just a fallback. It's safe, it's secure, it's a shortcut. It gets you forward. And I think a lot of it is also just emotional management, which is totally fair. It's not comfortable feeling stuck. It's not comfortable having to do a lot of research and think about things in a really deep way. We get fatigued. So there's some real reasons for it. But I think the real problem is the overconfidence bias that comes with that. I understand the need to act in habitual ways or in ways that other people act, but to feel that sense of overconfidence that that you know more than you actually do, or that you can do more than you can actually do, that's an insidious bias, and that's something that's hard to fight.
I mean, it's so interesting, right? On the one hand, you have this overconfidence. On the other hand, almost every single entrepreneur, at least I know, suffer from imposter syndrome, which we're going to discuss later. It's almost like you have this huge population. You also have this huge population, which is really, really interesting when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
You wish we could balance the two groups a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no. So here's just like another comment resonating what you said, navigating decision making, especially the organizational level. I can only imagine how challenging it is to work with people at the government level, right? So you may have a client there.
Yeah, and in government, and I would love for this LinkedIn user to reach out to me on LinkedIn, because I would love to talk to more people outside of business and tech about the way that those decisions are made, because I think they're made more at a group level. I think also the tech industry is just moves so quickly, and then decisions have to kind of move quickly as well. But I imagine that in government, there's more time. And I'm not sure I'd love to learn more about whether people use that time wisely or if they're just wasting that time.
Yeah, I love, because I have a taste of it through higher education. I think we're wasting so much time, to be honest with you. Yeah. So in terms of decision science, like, we're talking about making better decisions. So are there specific like principles that you actually follow, or what are the parameters that you actually look at, the benchmarks that you check off? So like, share with us, like, if you were working with a client or helping a company to handle a really challenging situation, like, what is your own kind of decision-making process? What are the factors that you are thinking about?
Yeah. So the first thing I always ask is, what is your end game? I think a lot of times clients come to me saying that they want whatever it is they want. They want survey research. They want kind of advice on, should I do even pricing or odd pricing? And they don't have a clear sense of the end game, what they want to accomplish, not just in the short term, but like the long term as well. And ultimately, every business wants to grow. That's their end game. But there are ways to grow that I'm not sure a lot of business leaders really understand clearly. Like, do you want to increase your share of revenue? Do you want to increase your share of market? For pricing, do you want to be a brand of quality? Do you want to be a bargain brand? What's your goal? And without that clear sense, it's hard to know. And then from there, the next step is, okay, what do you know and what don't you know? One of the major decision science or decision-making flaws that people make is they assume they know way more than they actually do, because we feel like we know a lot. Like, I feel like I know a lot, but what we don't carry with us all the time is the gap between what we know and what there is to know. And it's hard to know how large that gap is, because we are not there yet. So
And sorry to interrupt you for a second. I feel like even like the things that we do know, like oftentimes we really have a hard time connecting the dots, right? It's like separate pieces of knowledge. And I feel like we really need someone who can have that bird view, like connecting the dots for us. I feel that is also a very important skill that we need to have, just like to maximize the things that we already know, the value. Yeah.
I totally agree, especially because sometimes, and this is another thing that comes through very clear in this book, that we connect dots between things that have no connection. And that's an efficiency flaw as well. We see connections and relationships between things that really aren't always there. And so that's another part of my job as an outsider, to come in and really vet those relationships and because it's easy for me with no stake in the business. I'm not a stakeholder. I'm not a shareholder. I can come in and say, here's where things don't seem to be going right. And I can be objective.
Yeah, so interesting. So you share too, and anything else, the end game and knowing what you know, what you don't know, and
from there, if you don't know something, you need to know, and that's the next step. Like, what we don't know, is it necessary or not? And if it's necessary to know, then we go out and know it, we learn it. And there's an ROI calculation too, because there's a point at which you can keep learning, but you need to satisfy. So you need to stop because the ROI isn't that great. And then once you have all the information, then you kind of set up the decision tree. And there are companies, I have to say, there's businesses that create software. One is 1000 Minds is an excellent example of a company that develops software that then takes it from there and can plug in what your end game is, what your considerations are, what your values are, and prioritize them, and then help you generate the decision that comes out of that. And I work with them quite closely to kind of help businesses get to a better place. And so they use algorithms and statistics to get to a better place that my limited human brain cannot get to.
Wow, so interesting. And speaking of, the technology space, I wonder right now, we're talking about, even before we went live, you and I were talking about COVID and traveling, Thanksgiving's coming up. So I wonder how this global pandemic is actually affecting people in the tech industry and how they're making decisions. I assume it shouldn't be that bad, right? Because they're used to this like fast thinking and everything's already in the cloud. But anyway, share with us.
So people who work in tech, I feel, and this is again, like not backed by statistical evidence, this is just anecdotal, my experience, but I have experienced among my tech clients a very easy transition to remote work because they have the technology set up to do that. In fact, one of my most precious clients is a legal tech company up in Canada called Clio, and they manufacture legal practice management software. And they're on the forefront of this remote work kind of transition, and they went fully remote almost overnight. It's really not that hard, I think, for them. And but I think for other businesses, it's a little bit more challenging. For education, I imagine it's super challenging. I also teach at the University of Washington, and my courses, teaching those courses remotely can be pretty challenging. It's a completely different world in that space.
Yeah, totally. I mean, even I actually listened to the interview you did with Cleo, which is a great interview. I mean, I'm sure there are like companies in the legal space, they are actually resisting to change, struggling. So can you give us share some examples kind of in contrast with the people in the tech space?
Yeah, well, I mean, legal is a really, really interesting example because you have lawyers, and then you have court systems, you have administrative offices, and all of these companies, all these entities have to kind of get on board to work together. So even when lawyers are very adept at doing everything in a tech forward way and working remotely, they're working with court systems that aren't up to speed with having like hearings remotely or having like trials remotely, or how do you have a jury trial for murder on Zoom? There's a lot of challenges around that, and Cleo's been looking into that. We've been looking into that together to kind of figure out what that's about. And that's the most obvious example. It's just tech has always been more innovative and more adaptive. Some of these institutions that have been around for a long time and done things for a certain way for a long time. There's a lot of inertia, which is a lot of other decision science.
Baggage, right? Like baggage, things like that. It's hard. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Really great insights. And I want to shift our focus a little bit. And so a part of what you do, under decision science, you also spend more than a decade researching consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Consumer behaviors and how they are making decisions. And I wonder if you can share, because most people joining us live and watching replay are kind of entrepreneurs, business owners, small business owners, and like any key insights based on your decade of experience of studying consumers and how they are making decisions that you can share with us.
Yes. So I think some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen my clients make when I tell them what consumers are saying is that they assume that consumers are thinking rationally when they make their decisions. So when we're sitting in an office and we're trying to decide how to write a sales play, right? Like what should be in our sales play or sales book? So, or how should this marketing messaging sound? Or what should my elevator pitch be? Or even what should I pitch to investors? We're thinking about those arguments in terms of rational arguments a lot of the time, not all the time. There's some really crafty people that know how to do it a little bit more sophisticatedly, but it takes a lot of work to get there. But it's natural. I do that too. When I have a question about, well, why did my boyfriend do that? Or why did my mom do that? I'm always assuming there's a rational part to that and they're making rational decisions. Consumers, just like everyone else, are not. And so when you want to sell something to them or you want to understand what they're doing, you have to know what the rational kind of part of it is. And then this whole 70% of our decisions aren't rational, right? So
wow, that's like a high percentage.
It is. So we need to pay attention to that. So that's one thing that that's really, really important to understand. And the other is just do the research. I think a lot of people, again, like I said, that you make connections. A human brain naturally makes connections between things that aren't naturally connected. And so for instance, if you see that your sales numbers are going up, you might make this connection that clients and customers love you. I think that that's not an automatic connection. Hi, cat. I was just wondering if my cat was going to do the same thing. That you could have, high sales numbers and just be the only player in town and have, customers waiting to leave at any moment just because you're the only option there is. You have to really do that research and figure out, what people are really thinking.
Yeah, sorry, my
cat
just closed my window and she does that all the time. Yeah, very interesting. So I'm really shocked by this number. 70% of decisions are made based on irrational level. So to me, that's kind of shocking because, as an entrepreneur, I'm frequently, drafting my sales page. I'm thinking about listing all the numbers, stats, this and that. So like knowing this, how can we approach selling? How can we approach business? How can we approach like persuasion? How can we, approach the irrational aspect of their decision making so that we can get their attention, attract more customers, make them loyal? So what should we do?
We should put ourselves, first of all, in their headspaces and not assume that they're like us. And I think this is where the topic or the concept of empathy needs a little bit of reevaluation. I'm not so sure and I want to write a blog post about this eventually and maybe even a bigger piece, but that this idea of putting ourselves in other people's shoes is not necessarily effective because we can't take into account their the full breadth of their experiences. But I do think it's important to think and imagine what people, scientifically, consumers generally do, as opposed to what business leaders generally do. And a lot of times that's a huge flaw, that business leaders make choices that they see their colleagues making, and they think that would work for them. But if you put yourself in the mind of the consumer and you know that most of their decisions aren't rational, that they're going to act impulsively, they're going to act emotionally, they're going to buy a $300 pair of headsets because, they're Beats by Dre. And there's nothing rational about that, but it's important. So, and each category is different. If you're selling headphones, or if you're selling life insurance, or if you're selling a car, there's different levels of rationality and emotionality that kind of play in. So you really have to understand your category. You can't get away with not doing the research.
Totally. It really reminds me of, copywriting. You really want to tap into their pain points, evoke their emotions, generate that FOMO, like that fear, scarcity, all those things, all those are very strong emotions. Yeah, that can inspire them.
Totally, totally. And then there's also the ethical part of that. Like, you don't want to be evil about it, you don't want to be manipulative about it. So there has to be a really a fair way of influencing them, oftentimes to be able to get them to purchase things that they may actually need or want, that they kind of are reluctant to go for.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard line, right? Like influencing versus manipulating, right? I think knowing what you know, we can easily like manipulate people, but there's that ethical bottom line, right? Yeah, I love it. Great point. So how do people draw that line?
I don't know. I have had this conversation with colleagues at the UW, at the University of Washington. I've had this conversation with my students. I've had this conversation with colleagues in business. It's like the bottom line that everyone comes to is, well, you just kind of know it when you see it, but that's not necessarily the case, because you can cross that line and then it's too late. I think that's worthy of a lot more discussion and a lot more research. I know that there are books right there on my shelf that touch on it. There just needs to be a lot more conversation about it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of how I approach even parenting. I think it's one thing to teach our children all the tactics, strategies. I think it is more so important to build their characters, right? Yep. Because, and then they have that solid foundation to do good business, right? To apply what they have learned to make a positive change in our society. Yeah, great. So I actually, based on what you mentioned, I read one of your blog articles, which is, you said consumers don't do what they say dilemma. Is this what you're talking about, kind of rational versus irrational decision making?
Yeah. And that was really more aimed at kind of what I see to be the ineffectiveness of traditional market research or consumer research in helping companies understand how to grow their businesses, because a lot of traditional market research is really about what people say they want, what people say they need, what people say their pain points are. That's a lot of self-reporting. That's a lot of, people sitting in front of their computer, taking a survey and thinking about themselves. There's a lot of research out there that shows that people are very bad at that. Like, they're very bad at self-assessment. There's one study done, for instance, where people were asked to take a personality test and talk about themselves and rate themselves and self-report. Like, this is who I am. This is what I'm like. And then the researchers put recorders on them and had recorded every conversation they had throughout the day, and then had interviews with their friends and family members, and then put all the data together, and it didn't line up. So the way that they were presenting to the world, like someone who said, oh, I'm very social, I'm very popular, everybody loves me, would go through the whole day and barely say a few words to people. Of course, there's something a little bit off about that. So when you look at consumer research and you look at the data and it says, oh, well, 80% of consumers say they like this. Well, I mean, I think I would be very doubtful about that. And there has to be a better way of doing research than that, because people don't really say what they want to do or what they really mean, or they don't often even know. But also, what I want isn't what I'm going to do, because I'm making choices under constraints, which is really, really important. I want a Tesla. I'm being hypothetical here. I would want a Tesla. I can't afford it. That's what a lot of people I've heard say. They aren't going to buy the Tesla. They're going to buy the Honda. You might assume from their actions, and a lot of business clients that I've had will say, well, they bought that thing. They want that thing, right? Well, that's a rational post hoc explanation of a behavior. That's right. In reality, there are limitations to what you can do. I want to go to Hawaii. I can't right now, So there's a better way, and that's not what traditional market research is really kind of right now getting at.
Wow, that is so interesting. Like, do you know, like, what are some ways that we can improve the quality of like market research? Because this is clearly very important, and I can see all the like gaps and missing links. Yeah. So when you ask them, it's more like an ideal situation, right? Then there's reality. So very interesting. Any recommendations that people can actually improve like market research? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I started my own consultancy was because I felt like that wasn't there wasn't a better way. There was no interest in a better way. And so
Mm.
I think and these are my point of view, so ask around, don't just take my word for it, but one way is to incorporate books like this, or even this, which was written by my advisors, Michael Hector. So these are really just books about human nature and social life and social behavior that's rooted in really, really good research.
Mm.
This is Nobel Prize winning research. I'm never going to do Nobel Prize winning research as a market researcher. So why not take advantage of the research that's already out there and learn about just psychology, behavioral economics, sociology, human behavior to complement that, and use some of those learnings as you do your research. I recently did some research for a client where I incorporated decision-making, decision science concepts into a segmentation study. And we segmented people and then profiled them based on their likelihood to be indecisive, or their likelihood to be have preference stability. In other words, preference stability is about the extent to which people are unable, unwilling to try new things. I mean, this is really important for tech companies to understand, like, is my target consumer willing to try something new, or are they stuck in their ways?
Yeah, totally. I feel like on top of that, we need more people like you who are like translators, right? Because, I came from that academic background. Frankly speaking, I feel like we have so much research, but the people who really need to understand the research and actually are reading the research, very few. There is like a big gap, right? So I feel like what you do is really amazing. I love how you are having blog articles, kind of being a translator, and to translate this kind of dry language into like contextualize in a way that people, oh my God, this is how this body of knowledge can really improve my life, which I think is really fascinating. We need more educators like you for sure.
Thank you for saying that, because that is a mission to democratize or make more accessible these really, really great learnings that are so out of reach to the average person.
Yeah, totally. They like, I so agree. I so like average person who has time to read that, like so many theories, and that's not their job. They want to apply, give me like a roadmap, step by step process. Yeah. So I also want to ask you, earlier we were talking about decision science, we were talking about COVID. So talking about consumers, I'm sure, did you do any like pre-COVID study versus like right now? I'm so curious, like how this current global pandemic is affecting consumer decision-making, their behaviors. So share some insights with us. I can't wait to hear more. I'm sure there is like a lot.
Yes, there is. And so for my client Cleo and another client Accolade, which they offer health benefits or health advocacy as to employers who offer benefits to their employees. This Accolade is a great company. I did for them a series of trackers, like a series of studies where every month we were doing a survey of the general population, and we were tracking that data and using a semi-automated tool that I've developed. And what I really found from all of that, if you take all of that together, is just how obvious it is how people are making decisions where there are the fewest or the least amount of constraints. So again, like we're all making decisions under constraints. And so in healthcare, what we saw was that there's this trend towards telemedicine that just skyrocketed. It's not surprising to say that, but the reason for that isn't because telemedicine is suddenly so much better. It's because there are constraints on going to the doctor, because a lot of people are saying, okay, well, and you can look to Accolade's website. They have a great blog where they report on, and I've written some blog articles there too, where they share some of these insights. But there's a lot of limitations to going to the doctor because you could get COVID there, or you just don't want to leave the house. So where there are constraints, there are other opportunities, especially for tech, but there are other opportunities. But we saw that, month over month from, March through and on.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Actually, I'm pregnant. So we have been using the app to monitor my own blood pressure, and they will mail you a kit and to monitor your weight and all those things. And you can instantaneously ask a question. You'll get instantaneous feedback, what to eat. I'm feeling like this and that. I wish we had this earlier, to be honest with you. It was like, I definitely don't want to go to the hospital all the time, especially for regular checkup, right? So I love it. It's such a great change. Yeah.
I can't wait to see what's going to stick and what's not going to stick. Like what of all the behaviors that we are engaging in now that we didn't engage before, what's going to stick around and what's going to just kind of go back to normal.
What's your prediction, kind of seeing the trends now? Like, what's your prediction? How actually one of my questions is like, what's your recommendation for businesses and entrepreneurs and to not only like survive, but actually thrive in this new normal? Like, what's your prediction? What's your recommendation? What should people do more of?
As business owners, what they should do more of? Well, when it comes to consumer behavior, to predict those trends, I would say, look at the constraints, like look at what is constraining decision making. It's not about preferences. It's not about pain points all the time. It's about limitations and constraints that come from a social environment. And so if you look for that, then you can start to see trends. So for instance, we can't go out to eat as much. So people are cooking indoors more. So products like Brava, I don't know if you've ever heard of this product. Products like that are, I anticipate, likely to be more popular because they're allowing us to make restaurant quality food at home. Gyms are closing down. So of course, everybody's buying a Peloton or getting, like I bought a really expensive weight set because I'm never going to a gym again. And now I don't have to. I realize now I don't really need to. I have a spin bike. I have so some of these things, if you're a business owner, you're looking for opportunity or where to pivot, look for those constraints.
Totally. And I remember like this was quite a few months ago, like Facebook announced that and Twitter that people are going to just work from home permanently. I was like, wow, now people have a taste of this. Wow, people can actually trust us that we'll actually do the work, right? So we don't have to be like controlled environment. Why do we have to go back to that office where we have to pay for, like, especially Center City, like millions? You're in Seattle. I'm sure in Center City, Seattle is like millions of dollars. Like, what's the point, right?
It's so crazy. It's a ghost town now in downtown Seattle. But it's really interesting because if I were to predict where the social versus isolation, being isolated and being social is going to go, and it used to be that before COVID, we felt like we had to be in the same room in order to get things done. And now we're seeing we're not. So I predict that in the future, people are going to be social because they want to and not because they have to. So social environments are going to be more purely social. And if it's not a purely social event, then it's likely much more convenient to just do it over Zoom. And I am not sure I'll be right because, as the book Super Forecasting says, I will probably be wrong. But I'd be curious to see if that pans out. If it's more of a selective social engagement or behavior.
Yeah, I mean, like I used to travel for conferences all the time. And this week I actually just finished a live event. I was like, wow, this is actually pretty good, right? Like I really love it. And I think I'm definitely going to do more online events in the future. So I don't have to get stuck at the airport,
I know,
booking a hotel, all those really, really crazy things. And I feel like, that is something I'm also considering changing in the future. Very, very interesting. I also want to ask you, because so much is happening online, right? So do you see that as a need for like companies to be more active online? Like, for example, like, like Quora, like review sites, and to improve their digital footprint so more people can actually discover them? Because I assume traditionally through socializing, hey, what are you eating or what do you use? So we're reducing such like random conversations, in-person conversation, and people are searching a lot more, having so much more time spending online. Do you see that as a need for businesses to improve their online presence, like on review sites, like maybe digital footprint, be more active on social media? So what do you think about that?
Well, I kind of always thought that should have been the case, like because the online space being what it is, and I mean, you're now seeing broadband in rural areas where you haven't seen it before. Like it's just that trend was going. And COVID might have accelerated that, But it's kind of a no-brainer to say, to my opinion, to say, of course, more companies should go and be, if businesses want to be seen and known, they should be where people are, and more people are online, COVID or no COVID. But with that said, with COVID, it's posed a unique challenge in that now everything is online. Like this division between the online and offline space, like the social space and the tech space, they're kind of blurred, they're kind of merged. And so now, because there's so much online, there's so much more noise, there's so much more stuff. It's not a question of be there, it's a question of be strategic there. Be there in a very calculated, rational, strategic way. Know your audience, know your brand, know what you're trying to say, and cut through the noise. It's really more important than ever to get that right.
I so agree with you. And even like some changes that I made in my own business is that like I used to only write content just like, on the fly, but now I'm actually applying a lot more strategies, planning out my content, using SEO, using different tools to optimize my content a lot more so I can actually rise above the noise. I love it. So many great tips. I just want to respect your time. So we are just wrapping this up. As I mentioned earlier, you and your co-author have this exciting book that is coming out. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us more about your book. Where can people get a copy? What the book is about? Things like that.
So my friend Tony Sablon, he's an investment planner here in the Seattle area. And he and I started having conversations a couple of years ago about why the people who would come to him for advice would make the silliest decisions and why. And so we just decided we have to write a book about this. So 2 years later, we have this book and it's coming out, launching on December 1st. And it'll be available on Amazon. It's called Money Off the Table, Decision Science and the Secret to Smarter Investing. And if you just go to Amazon and just do a search for my last name, it should come up. And it's about using decision science principles to avoid making bad investment decisions. It's not like most books where, they give advice on what to do. It's more on what to avoid and how to be careful. And yeah, there's a lot of tidbits about decision science for life as well. So it might be an interesting read for people who even aren't into investing.
Totally. I'm just thinking about, what a good timing. Christmas is here. People are going to like buy this or buy that. We're going to make lots of decisions, traveling or not, business, New Year resolution, investment, all those things. So yeah. So tell us the name again, and so people can get it. Yeah.
It's called Money Off the Table, Decision Science and the Secret to Smarter Investing.
Awesome. Excited. I can't wait to check it out and get a copy myself. So also share with us and what are some other besides your own, and clearly you are a scholar. So what are some books that you recommend? Give us a few names. Yeah.
Yeah. So I already mentioned Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. So I don't know if you can see that. This is a really fun read. It's a lot easier to read than the other one. It's Nudge. And then this one is really academic, but I have to plug it because it has been very influential on me. I think too much of what we talk about in the science of decision making is about behavioral economics and the psychology, but sociology has so much to share, so much to tell us. Everything from bandwagon effects to, norms to sanctions and incentives and all of that. So I think it's really important to get that bit of it too.
Oh, that's really interesting. I can't wait to check them out. I'm going to compile the list of books so everyone can get it. So share with us, where can people learn more about you? I have your website on the screen, your social media handle. Where is a good place for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, KabiriConsulting.com is great. You can reach out to me. You can subscribe to my blog there and get my blog posts emailed to you directly. I'm also, along with the book launch on December 1st, I'm launching a website called yournextdecision.com. It's not up yet, but it will be. And if you subscribe to the blog at Kabiri Consulting, you will get notified of that launch. And it's decision science applied to romance and love, relationships, decision science applied to work, decision science applied to social justice, and then decision science applied to mental wellness. So it's just, there'll be a lot of content on there, some papers to read, a lot of blog stuff, and just a resource, classes. You can get one-on-one conversations with me. But it will be up on December 1st.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Great, great. Like, well, I can't wait to check it out. So share with us, the website will be live on which day?
It will be
new one.
live on December 1st. I'm looking
Okay.
at my calendar over here. It'll be live on December 1st, and it's called yournextdecision.com.
Wow, the same time as the book. That's exciting.
Yep, that's a lot going on right now.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
if you subscribe to kabiriconsulting.com, then you will definitely get notified when your next decision gets launched.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely, everyone, make sure you join her email list and stay updated. Lots of amazing and cool, awesome stuff coming out. And I can't wait to apply, learn, check them out, and learn how I can apply it to make my own life better. So thank you so much, Nika, for a really great conversation. I definitely learned a lot regarding decision science, consumer research, everything. I can't wait to apply some of them to my own life and my own business. Yeah, so thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us live from all over the globe. I appreciate you all. As always, the show is sponsored by StreamYard. And thank you so much to StreamYard for being a sponsor. And I hope to see you guys again, not next week because it is Thanksgiving. So in 2 weeks. So I hope to see you guys again and to join this global classroom that has no walls. So thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.